In 1994, Rwanda became the site of one of the most horrific genocides in modern history. Over the course of just 100 days, an estimated 800,000 people were brutally murdered. Families were torn apart, entire communities were destroyed, and the world was left grappling with the question, how did this happen? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the Rwandan genocide, exploring its causes, the horrifying events, and the aftermath that shaped a nation. To understand the Rwandan genocide, we need to look at the country's complex history. Rwanda is a small, landlocked nation in East-Central Africa. For centuries, the two main ethnic groups, the Hutus and the Tutsis, lived side by side. While their distinctions were initially based more on social class than ethnicity, everything changed under colonial rule. During the early 20th century, Belgian colonialists cemented divisions between the Hutus and Tutsis by implementing a system that favored the minority Tutsi population. Tutsis were given positions of power, while Hutus were marginalized, fostering deep resentment. This divide was institutionalized through identity cards that labeled people as Hutu or Tutsi. The seeds of hatred were sown, and tensions between the two groups simmered for decades. By the late 20th century, Rwanda was a country on the edge. In the decades leading up to the genocide, political power in Rwanda shifted into the hands of Hutu extremists. President Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, took power in 1973 and maintained a tight grip on the country. But ethnic tensions continued to grow, fueled by political propaganda and hate speech targeting the Tutsi minority. On April 6, 1994, President Habyarimana's plane was shot down, killing everyone on board. To this day, it remains unclear who was responsible, but this event became the catalyst for a well-planned and brutal genocide. Within hours, Hutu extremists, including members of the government, military, and local militias known as the Interahamwe, began executing a systematic plan to wipe out the Tutsi population. Lists of Tutsi families were distributed, roadblocks were set up, and radio stations broadcasted messages inciting violence. What followed was an unimaginable wave of violence. Ordinary Hutus were encouraged or coerced into joining the killings, turning neighbors against each other. Thousands of Tutsis sought refuge in churches, schools, and stadiums, only to be massacred where they hid. The Interahamwe militias, armed with machetes, clubs, and rifles, went door to door, hunting down Tutsis and moderate Hutus who opposed the genocide. Women and children were not spared. Entire families were wiped out in acts of unspeakable brutality. During the genocide, an estimated 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were murdered in just 100 days. The world watched as atrocities unfolded, but did little to intervene. Despite having peacekeepers on the ground, the United Nations and Western countries failed to act decisively. The UN reduced its peacekeeping presence at the height of the violence, and the international community largely ignored the cries for help from Rwandans. The genocide came to an end in July 1994 when the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, a Tutsi-led rebel group, captured the capital, Kigali. Their victory ended the violence, but the scars left on Rwanda were deep and long-lasting. Efforts to seek justice for the victims of the genocide led to the establishment of the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR, which tried key perpetrators of the violence. Within Rwanda, Gacaca courts were established to handle the overwhelming number of cases, focusing on community reconciliation rather than punishment. Today, Rwanda has made remarkable strides in rebuilding and reconciling. The government has implemented strict laws against hate speech and ethnic discrimination, and there are ongoing efforts to promote unity and healing. However, the trauma of the genocide still lingers, and questions about accountability and reconciliation remain. The international community's failure to intervene in Rwanda has been the subject of intense criticism. Despite clear evidence of an unfolding genocide, the United Nations and powerful countries like the United States and France hesitated to call it a genocide or commit resources to stopping it.